In the summer of 1996, Wilmington, Delaware was a city of power and politics, where the wealthy dined with the powerful and secrets were easy to keep. But on June 27th, one secret couldn't stay buried. Anne Marie Fahey, 30. Years old, beautiful, bright, and beloved, vanished without a trace. She was the scheduling secretary for Delaware's governor, and she was dating one of the state's most prominent men, Thomas J. Capano, a well-connected lawyer and former deputy attorney general. At first it looked like a disappearance. Then it became a scandal, and soon it turned into one of Delaware's most infamous murder cases. Anne's friend said she had been trying to end the relationship. She told her diary that Capano was controlling, manipulative, and wouldn't let her go. When she stopped answering his calls, he snapped. On the night of June 27, 1996, Capano took Anne to dinner. It would be the last time anyone ever saw her alive. Her body was never found. But what investigators uncovered next: secret affairs, cover-ups, and a powerful man's arrogance would unravel the illusion of Delaware's elite forever. This is the story of Thomas J. Capano, the killer who thought his wealth could hide the truth. Classification: murderer. Characteristics: former Deputy Attorney General of Delaware. The victim's body was never recovered. Number of victims: 1. Date of murder: June 27, 1996. Date of arrest: August 19, 1999. Date of birth: October 11, 1949. Victim profile: his mistress, Anne Marie Fahey, 28. The appointment secretary to then-Governor Thomas R. Carper. Method of murder: location: Wilmington, Delaware. USA status: sentenced to death on March 15, 1999. Resentenced to life in prison without parole in February 2006. Died in prison on September 19, 2011. Thomas J. Capano is an American lawyer from Wilmington, Delaware, who was convicted of the 1996 murder of Anne Marie Fahey. The case is noteworthy because of Capano's close association with Delaware's political establishment, and in that, Fahey's body was never recovered. Capano is a member of a prominent family of Delaware land developers and building contractors. He became a wealthy, well-connected lawyer, state prosecutor, and political consultant, known to nearly everyone in Delaware's political community. Anne Marie Fahey was the personal scheduler to Governor Thomas R. Carper. She was an attractive 30-year-old member of another well-known family and was attempting to end a romantic relationship with the married Capano. As a result of this, he murdered her and dumped her body in the Atlantic Ocean. All Delaware watched as U.S. Attorney Colum F. Connolly built the case against Capano, and as he was tried and sentenced to death in 1999 by Superior Court Judge William Swain Lee. In January 2006, the Delaware Supreme Court affirmed his conviction for murder, but remanded the case for sentencing because the death penalty was imposed by a non-unanimous jury verdict. In February of that year, the state abandoned their efforts for capital punishment, opting to leave Capano in prison for life without parole. Capano's attorney stated that they would continue to appeal his conviction in federal courts. In April 2008, the U.S. District Court reaffirmed Capano's conviction, rejecting an appeal made by Capano's lawyers. Thomas J. Capano, born October 11, 1949, is a disbarred American lawyer from Wilmington, Delaware, who was convicted of the 1996 murder of his lover, Anne Marie Fahey. The case made headlines because Capano is from a wealthy family and was a former Deputy Attorney General of Delaware. Background: Capano is a member of a prominent family of Delaware real estate developers and building contractors. He became a wealthy, well-connected lawyer, state prosecutor, Wilmington city attorney, counsel to Governor Michael N. Castle, and political consultant well known in Delaware's political community. In 1994, Capano was a partner at the Wilmington office of the law firm Saul Ewing, LLP, when he became involved with Anne Marie Fahey, the 28-year-old appointment secretary to then-Governor Thomas R. Carper. Fahey's disappearance. Investigation. Anne Marie Fahey, the scheduling secretary for Delaware's then-Governor Thomas Carper, was last seen alive on Thursday, June 27, 1996, when she went to dinner with Capano in Philadelphia. Fahey's family reported on June 30, 1996, that she was missing. An extensive investigation concerning her disappearance ensued. That investigation culminated in November 1997, over 16 months later, in Capano's arrest for her murder. Fahey's body was never found, however, and the state was unable to establish the precise manner by which Fahey died. Fahey's disappearance was a mystery for a considerable time before Capano was charged with her murder. Capano, who was the last known person to have seen her alive on June 27, 1996, was an early suspect in the investigation by the Wilmington police. By mid-July 1996, the FBI actively joined in the investigation, and a federal grand jury heard evidence for over a year. In September 1995, Fahey met Michael Scanlon while she was still involved in the relationship with Capano. After a rocky beginning in her relationship with Scanlon, she fell in love with him. Capano murdered her at the house he rented, and with the assistance of his brother Jerry, Capano dumped her body in the Atlantic Ocean. Jerry Capano owned a boat, and when it was sold, its 2 anchors were missing. Detectives suspected the boat's anchors were used to weigh down Fahey's body. On November 8, 1997, Jerry Capano was interviewed by detectives and told them that Thomas had asked for the boat, and then admitted to Jerry that he had murdered someone who was attempting to extort him. They went to Stone Harbor, New Jersey, with a large cooler that contained Fahey's body. As this type of cooler is frequently used by fishermen, it was not considered suspicious. The Capanos went 62 miles, 100 kilometers out to sea, and pushed the cooler overboard. However, it floated even after they shot the cooler. Thomas retrieved the cooler, took the body out, and wrapped the anchor chains around it. Jerry then was asked to help dispose of a blood-stained sofa and carpet in a dumpster which was managed by another brother, Louis. Subsequently, Thomas ordered Louis to empty the dumpsters. Louis had them emptied out of their regular schedule. The cooler was found on July 4, 1996, by fisherman J. Chubb. Investigators did not have a murder weapon or a body, and investigations into Capano's records in buying guns was not revealing. However, Capano's mistress, Debbie McIntyre, had bought a gun and, when questioned by investigators, admitted to supplying the weapon to Capano. Trial and appeal. U.S. Attorney Colum Connolly and Delaware State Prosecutor Ferris Wharton were the state's prosecutors, and William Swain Lee was the presiding judge in the highly publicized Superior Court trial. The defense claimed that McIntyre had burst into Capano's room, and as Capano and McIntyre were wrestling for the gun, it fired, killing Fahey. On January 17, 1999, the trial resulted in Capano's conviction, and he was sentenced to death. In January 2006, the Delaware Supreme Court affirmed Capano's conviction, but remanded the case for sentencing because the death penalty was imposed by a non-unanimous jury verdict. In February of that year, the state abandoned its efforts to seek capital punishment for Capano, opting to leave him imprisoned for life without parole. Capano's attorneys stated they would continue to appeal his conviction in federal courts. As of 2011, Capano is imprisoned at the James T. Vaughn Correctional Center. Habeas corpus petition and appeal. In April 2008, the U.S. District Court reaffirmed Capano's conviction, rejecting a habeas corpus petition filed by Capano. On September 2, 2008, the U.S. Third Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed this decision, making the only avenue left for review of the conviction to be petitioned for certiorari to the U.S. Supreme Court. Capano did not file this petition, bringing an end to the case. Portrayals. Several books have been written about the murder case, including And Never Let Her Go, Thomas Capano, The Deadly Seducer by Anne Rule, The Summer Wind, Thomas Capano and the Murder of Anne Marie Fahey by George Anastasia and Fatal Embrace, The Inside Story of the Thomas Capano Anne Marie Fahey Murder Case by Chris Barish and Peter Meyer. In 2001, a television movie based on Anne Rule's book was made called And Never Let Her Go, with Mark Harmon cast as Capano and Catherine Morris as Anne Marie Fahey. Thomas J. Capano. A Superior Court judge, Thursday, set June 7, 2005, as the date-convicted killer. Thomas J. Capano will be executed for the 1996 murder of Anne Marie Fahey. The previous execution date was stayed because of Capano's appeal, and it is unlikely the former prosecutor will be executed on the new date. He has 30 days to file an appeal with the Delaware Supreme Court, and that's what's going to happen, said Capano's attorney, Joseph M. Bernstein. Just about any day he set within reason is academic. Earlier this month, Sussex County resident judge T. Henley Graves denied Capano's motions for post-conviction relief, rejecting arguments that Capano had ineffective legal counsel at trial and that his death sentence should be set aside because of a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Capano had argued that the Supreme Court's ruling in Ringvries, Arizona, in 2002 required juries to unanimously recommend the death sentence. The jury in Capano's case did not. It is the sentence of this court that you shall be kept in the custody of the Department of Correction until Tuesday, June 7, 2005, and on that day between the hours of 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., you shall be injected intravenously with a substance or substances in a lethal quantity sufficient to cause death until you are dead, Graves said, Thursday. As Graves passed the sentence, Bernstein stood next to Capano, who has gained weight in prison. Capano's feet were shackled, and he wore an orange jumpsuit and had a white beard. For the most part, he only whispered to Bernstein. But when Graves denied Capano's request to hear any future sentencings over videophone, Capano blurted, "We did before." Graves explained that because of the magnitude of the death penalty, he felt it was important that he be present. "If this occurs again, I will expect sentencing to take place in open court with the defendant present and counsel present," Graves said. Capano, who suffers from the stomach disorder colitis, has been requesting not to be present at his sentencings. He has some fairly well-documented health problems, Bernstein said. "When you come up here, they get you up at 4 in the morning and you don't eat. For somebody with health problems, that's difficult." Capano was convicted of the 1996 murder of Fahey 30, who was the scheduling secretary for then-Gov. Tom Carper, now a U.S. Senator, Capano sentenced to death March 16, 1999. Wilmington, a Delaware judge, upheld a jury recommendation and sentenced Delaware attorney Thomas Capano to the death penalty for the 1996 murder and disappearance of his mistress, Anne Marie Fahey. Judge William Swain Lee could have overturned the jury's 28 recommendation and sentenced Capano to life in prison without parole. But before Tuesday's sentencing, Judge Lee had indicated his decision by saying that he would give the jury's recommendation great weight. The defendant fully expected to get away with it, and if not for his arrogant and controlling nature, he may have succeeded, Judge Lee said in court. He is a ruthless murderer and feels compassion for no one and remorse only for the circumstances he finds himself in today. Capano showed no emotion as he learned his sentence and mouthed, "It will be all right," to his mother and brother Joseph as he was led from the courtroom. On January 28, the jury recommended in a 10-2 vote that Capano should be put to death by lethal injection. Tuesday's sentencing is the end of a sensational trial and the beginning of what could be a long appeals process for Capano. Judge Lee scheduled Capano's execution to take place June 28th, but in Delaware, it takes an average of 8.5 years for a death sentence to be carried out. On January 18, the former state prosecutor and political advisor was convicted of murdering Fahey, the governor's secretary, in June 1996, stuffing her in a water cooler and then dumping her body at sea. Prosecutors said Capano killed Fahey because she wanted to end their 3-year affair. Fahey's body was never found, and prosecutors had to rely on the testimony from Capano's brothers to get a conviction. Gerard Capano testified that he helped his brother dispose of the body, while another brother, Louis, admitted helping Thomas conceal evidence. For over 2 years after the murder, Capano never gave his account of Fahey's death. But at trial, Capano testified that his other mistress, Deborah McIntyre, killed Fahey out of a jealous rage and that he was trying to protect her. McIntyre denied any involvement in Fahey's murder and said she was not with Capano on the night of the incident. During closing arguments in the penalty phase of his trial, Capano refused to admit to Fahey's murder and told jurors he was not going to beg them for mercy. But he asked jurors to spare his life for the sake of his family. "I'm not going to ask you to sit here and beg for my life," Capano said. "I do ask you to consider my daughters, my mother, and the rest of my family. For their sake, I do ask you to let me live." During the penalty phase of the trial, the Faheys testified that Capano not only ended Anne Marie's life, but also cheated them of an opportunity to properly bury her. Prosecutors argued that the gruesome nature of Fahey's killing and Capano's attempted cover-up warrant his death by lethal injection. In addition, the judge also had to consider evidence that Capano planned Fahey's murder. Prosecutors said he purchased a gun a month before the slaying and asking his brother Gerard about the use of his boat. During the penalty phase, the state also attempted to prove a pattern of behavior in Capano by using evidence that he solicited the beating of a former love interest nearly 20 years ago. Linda J. Marandola told jurors he stalked her for months after they had 2 sexual encounters in the late 1970s. According to Marandola, she eventually spurned Capano, and he hounded her so much that she finally had to leave Delaware. Attorney James S. Green. Marandola's former boss and Capano friend testified that Capano told an FBI informant he wanted Marandola hurt for rebuffing him. The Faheys have filed a wrongful death suit against Capano and his brothers for their involvement in the attempted cover-up of the murder. After years of lies and legal battles, Thomas Capano was convicted in 1999 of murdering Anne Marie Fahey. He was sentenced to death, later reduced to life in prison without parole in 2006. Prosecutors said Capano killed Anne in a fit of rage, then enlisted his brothers to help dump her body into the Atlantic Ocean, weighted with an ice chest that was never recovered. Capano never admitted guilt. He died in prison in 2011, still claiming innocence. Anne Marie Fahey's body was never found, but her words lived on in diary entries that revealed her fear and her courage. She wrote, "I am afraid of Tom Capano, but I'm stronger than I think." In the end, that strength brought him down. Because no matter how powerful you are, the truth always surfaces.